This is the last of 4 presentations on the use of the import add-in code constructor option in gra005. If you have not gone through at least 1 and 2, you will be lost in this presentation. In this presentation, we're going to be importing text files that, again, don't have a structure that can be read natively by GINT, converting them to a temporary GINT CSV formatted file, writing a script, and importing into GINT. Exactly the same as we did in number 2, also a text file import. However, in 2 and 3, we did direct imports. And with direct import, we set up that temporary CSV file to have the exact same data dictionary as the target project, meaning the same table names and field names. So we're mapping directly into the target. And in this case, we're taking a situation where we know the source structure. We can convert it, but we don't know what the target is. The final GINT database structure could be anything. This is a case we encountered with gra011 on our website, which imports WinCore, Texas DOT WinCore files. We can manipulate it so that GINT can read it, but we don't know the target database. The people download it and they have to import into their database structure. So in this case, this is a mapped import. We're going to use gra005 to create the code architecture so that we can write to our own temporary structure, our own target structure. And then the end user will need to write a correspondence file to map between the target structure we created and their own database structure. Another case where this would be useful if you're collecting electronic information and you have a number of data structures that you need to write to, you would use this technique and then write correspondence files for each of the different structures. So the code doesn't have to change. You have the same code for different targets, and with a different correspondence file do the appropriate mapping. That's a lot easier to do than writing code to deal with different target structures. Because then every time you add another target, you would then have to change the code and have to modify it to accommodate this new structure, as opposed to just creating a correspondence file, which is a lot easier than writing code. All right, let's take a look. So we're going to run through the process of creating the code skeleton very quickly, because we've already done it in the second and third presentation. And the database structure we have open here is the one that we ship as an example with gra011. So, as in the other presentations, we go under add-ins, code skeleton generator, and we're going to use the import add-in. Procedure name, import WinCore. By me, imports WinCore files. You can get much more detail. We actually did that in gra011. We'll show you that later. Now, in the other 2 presentations, we used the current project as the target structure. Again, we don't know what the target structure is going to be, so we're going to use our own GINT CSV file that we have to create. We're going to prompt the end user for a correspondence file, and unlike the other 2 presentations where we didn't have enough project information to create a new project in an enterprise database, with these files we do. So we're going to allow importing to a new project if the target structure is an enterprise database. Okay. And source files, WinCore files, the extension is CLG, and we're going to allow multiple file selection. It wants to know the name of the GINT CSV format file. And it's done. Let's go under rules, get rules code, our add-ins. We'll go past the other two that we created earlier. Go to the end and paste. Save that. Now, it's written, let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. So this is what a typical Texas DOT WinCore file looks like. The project information is here, and unfortunately it's also at the end. There are 3 other project fields at the very end. Who prepared it, who revised it, and there will normally be names here. This is a dummy file. And then another version line, in addition to the version up here. So we have to take this. Obviously, again, can't read this. It doesn't know what any of this stuff means. It's in the wrong format. We're going to create this template file, which we just specified during the construction process. And we're going to create a series of tables. And you can name them any way you want. And same with the fields. Name them any way you want, but whatever order. It really doesn't matter in terms of the actual import, because the user is going to have to map this structure into their own. Now, of course, you don't want to name them crazy things. You want to name them in a way that the user understands what data is held in these tables and fields. So we create a project table, and then we have input units, output units, county, highway number, etc. We have skipped the 2 version fields. You decided not to import those. You may decide to, so you create fields for those. And then the next section is what they call the whole section. It's all on one line, and we're calling that point. We could have called it whole, and we're using the reserve names point and point ID for borehole name, etc. The rest is up to the, we're naming according to what's here. And then we have what they call the strata section, which generally in a GIN file would be called lithology. And it's here, the different field names. And to really get those field names, we had to open up WinCore and look at their interface to see what each of these fields meant. Some are obvious, some are not. And then we have the Texas Cone table, the laboratory table named TAT in their files, and then we start again with whole, strata, etc. And so here's the way we set that up. So that's our template. So let's look at the code. Again, like the others, it's in 2 modules. So here's the first module. You will not have to touch, just like the others, except you probably want to make a more detailed description. One thing that's added here, different than the other 2, we have another file dialog that comes up when the user runs this rule, and it asks for the correspondence file. And the other thing that's different than the other 2, let's look at the, import CPT is fine. This section is missing. This section checked to see if we were on an empty, if we were on a record in the project table in the enterprise database that was not on a project. It was on the blank line, the new project line. And in that case, for the other 2, we said, no, you can't do that. It has to be an existing project. In this new one, since there is enough information for creating a new project, we have a lot of project information, we didn't put that section in. So those are the only 2 differences between this primary procedure and the other 2 examples we went through. Otherwise, exactly the same. Now, in here, we have 5 different tables we're creating temporary files for with the field name list, which it took from that template file. And then we're walking the files just like on the others, and then we're splitting the data in the files into the different lines. And this is where the code generator stops, and then you have to write your code here. And then when that's done, the rest is exactly the same. So right now, this looks exactly like the other two, except we have different tables. So let's assume we've written this code. Now I'm going to show you this code in a moment. We're going to look at the final gra011. But let's assume we've done our work here. Then we'll finish here, and then you have the last step is get rules, add-in manager, and we're going to add that add-in. So we have that menu item under the add-ins menu. So this is going to be WinCore import. And we'll call it WinCore import for the actual label in the menu. It'll be under a menu item called import. Again, you don't have to put it under a submenu if you don't wish. And then it's executed in input, and then we specify the file we want, or the code we want to execute, which is import WinCore. And then we're going to require a save before this command is executed in case you have any unsaved changes when the end user runs the command. And that's the entire process. Now let's take a look at the actual code that was put into the your code here line. Change library to gra011. Let's take a look. And here's the import WinCore. It's exactly the same as our primary procedure. It was written by the gra005 code. The only difference is we've expanded the description pretty dramatically here. Otherwise, exactly the same. Now into the second procedure, again, we changed the description. We put in the skeleton of the source file, so we can refer to it as we're writing our code here. It's basically just taking a sample WinCore file, pasting it in without the data, and then changing the data lines to what they actually mean. And here we've set up a whole bunch of constants telling the code down below what line is the units on. So the first line, the line 2 is the version, and we're not using it for our import. The county's on line 3, etc. For the target, when we're pushing it out to this temporary structure, we're putting the input units in position 1, the output units in position 2, etc. And we have a number of other constants for various markers within the files and other kinds of things. And this was generated by the gra005 up to here. This was generated by the gra005. Now, we have to do something special here. We could have parsed this file a number of different ways. The way we've decided to do it here is we want to search for the end of at the end of the file, look for this as our marker, this line here, and we're counting back in case there's some extra blank lines. Once we know this line number, we know what line number this is on, what line number this is on. We also know what the last line here is. So that's what we've done. So we're counting backwards from the number of lines to the line to number 1, step -1. And we're looking for this last line marker, which we've defined as a constant up here, looking for version. Once we find it, we store that line number, and then we can grab the reviewed by lines, the last line -1, prepared by lines, last line -2. So as we're walking through the, well, at this point, if the file number is the first file, we're storing the project information. We're not going to store the project information redundantly. You can't have more than one project record. So we're just saying if it's the first file, let's store that. In subsequent files, we're not. Keep in mind that WinCore files have a limit of 20 boreholes per file. So you might need to import many WinCore files into one project if you have more than 20 boreholes. And then we walk each line. And I will leave it to you to review this. This is going to vary. How you write this part of the code depends on your source structure. So this is going to vary dramatically between the different use cases. And we're writing to the different structures, the different temporary files, the strata file, the Texas cone file, the laboratory file, and the whole file, the point ID file. But once that's done, we've gone through all the files here. From this point down, it's exactly the same as it was in the first two presentations for text file, direct text file import, and direct Excel file import. Okay, let's see this in action. Add-ins, gra, and then import Texas DOT. And we'll go into the source files, and we have one CLG file. And it asks us for the correspondence file we're going to use. I didn't show you how this was made, but basically it's you take that source file we created, this temporary target structure. This becomes the source in your correspondence file, data design correspondence file application, and your target is your database structure, either a data template or a project. And then you build your correspondence file from those two pieces. Now, the how to build that's a presentation, maybe a few presentations on its own. We have quite a bit of documentation in help. Just do a search on correspondence file. About 90% or more of correspondence files are very, very straightforward. You're just saying this field goes to that field, this field goes to that field, this table goes into that table, etc. There are some cases where you have to do some calculations and breaking things apart and putting them in different places. That's where it gets interesting. And there's, again, a lot of documentation in the help file. Okay, so this is the one we want. And override option, there's nothing here, so it doesn't matter. Override option, there's nothing to overwrite. And it's done. Let's take a look. Brought in the project information, the hole information, lithology, Texas cone data, different holes, lab testing, water content and density, and Atterberg limits. And there we have it. Thank you.